Thank you, everybody. I'll call this meeting to order, though we're already quite orderly, I see. Before we get underway, I'd like to ask Kahu Ropata to do a karakia.
Ngā rangatiro o te kaunihera, ki te koromatua, tumu whakarai, te whakamininga, huitahi nei, I tēnei ata nei rāta mi ki a koutou. E hono rei he Gloria, he maungarongo ki te whenua, he whakaro pai ki ngā tangata katoa, a tihei, mauri ora. E te atua tō mātou kaihanga, ka tia ho te maramatanga me te ora ia kupu kōrero. Ti matau mahi ke mau, te tika me te aroha. Me te aki utonu ki a mātou tau aroha I roto I tēnei huinga. Whakaki a mātou whakaro mātou mahi katoa te wairua tapu. Tuturu ki a rongo whakamaua kia tīnā.
Tīnā.
Hui e.
Tai ki.
Tēnā koe.
Kia ora, Andre. Mai haere mai, kia koutou. Welcome to this council meeting of the 24th of November. Welcome to my fellow elected members. I have the new chairs of our community boards who have already been appointed here today. Also, Otaki Community Board has not yet appointed their chair, so we have two members of the Otaki Community Board here today. For the future, there will be an appointee from each community board on each of the council meetings. So for the future, there'll be one member on each of the council and committees. I'd also like to welcome tangata whenua who are here today, sitting at the council table, as was the case in the previous triennium, and we'll be making some decisions around their future involvement in such meetings today. I'd like to welcome council staff here today, also the large gallery of public who've turned up today. Obviously there might be an item of interest on the agenda. And also some of our past elected members I see still can't stay away from the council chamber. Welcome, Gwyn. I'd also like to do the council blessing as well as the karakia. So I'd like to ask our new Ramati Community Board Chair, Bede Larissy, to read that for us now.
As we deliberate on the issues before us, we trust that we will reflect positively on the communities we serve. Let us all seek to be effective and just so that with courage, vision and energy we provide positive leadership in a spirit of harmony and compassion.
Thank you, Bede. So before I go any further, actually, could I remind everybody to please have their phones on silent for this meeting so we don't have any disruptions. So next we have item 3, apologies. Do I have any apologies for this meeting today? There being none, I'll move on to declarations of interest. I'm calling for any declarations of interest on items on the agenda today. We had a very full briefing around declarations of interest and also bias the other day. So do I have any declarations at this time? There being none. So we don't have item number 5 or 6. So we move on to public speaking time. And I have quite a long list here. I am not using my discretion to limit the time to keep us within 30 minutes, but I would ask public speakers, please, to stay within the 3 minutes. Also, if somebody has already made a point that you're intending to make, if you could just acknowledge it and move on, rather than having repetition, which is discouraged in our standing orders. And I'll also be applying that during debate today. So first up, we have Gwyn Compton.
Kia ora katoa, ko Gwyn Compton tokoinga. For all of those of you that I haven't met, I'm Gwyn Compton and I'm a former councillor who is one of only a handful of councillors last triennium who was consistently voting against the Kapiti Gateway. So it should come as no surprise that I'm here today to speak in support of Councillor Coe's notice of motion to put a stop to the gateway, and I encourage you to vote with Councillor Coe on that. As I said back in February 2021, the process behind this project has been abysmal, and you cannot separate the project from the process that has informed it. I could specifically talk about what I my honestly held opinion are issues around conflicts of interest, predetermination, incorrect application of standing orders. I could even talk about the so-called independent review. But what I'd like to talk about are some of the numbers, which I think are damning enough to put a stop to this on its own. So first, let's talk about the project budget, which the last publicly available figures had shown had blown out by 72%. And that's even with that original budget back in February 2021, for 4.5 million, that had 35% worth of contingencies built into it. It had a 20% construction contingency and a 15% COVID-19 contingency. Now, over that same period, up to May of this year, when the budget popped up to 7.75 million, constructor section inflation has only sat around about 8 or 9%. So you're looking at a situation where the budget blowout has been far in excess of what construction section inflation has been. And that's even if you take out something like the Southern Car Park extension. We could go on then to talk about the visitor numbers and spend projection, which in the February 2021 business case were actually just based off the existing growth. They didn't ever make a case for any additional growth because of the gateway or any additional spend because of the gateway. And that was actually acknowledged in PwC's review of it. They said that visitor numbers and visitor spends, these have not been modelled as no visitor data or research on these numbers has been completed. So any claims of net benefits around this project, and the business case did attempt to make those claims, they're just pure fiction. Even beyond that, we could look at whether this project is needed for biosecurity, and the simple truth is it isn't. Since Kapiti Island was declared predator-free in 1990, there has been one biosecurity incursion, and that was a female stoat that was pregnant that was believed to have hitched a ride across from the mainland on a piece of driftwood, so nothing to do with tourists. You've had 23 years of it working effectively. You could even talk about the fact that this project actually led to council recording its lowest ever results in its residents' opinion survey. And it was the single most negatively commented on project in the long-term plan consultation. Now, if you axe this project, will you have to refund money to the government? Absolutely. But you also have to remember that the money that's been booked, that contributed to $6.9 million surpluses in each of the last 2 financial years. So I'd really strongly encourage you to vote in support of Councillor Coe. As I said in my valedictory speech, this project is over budget, it's behind schedule, it's unwanted by our community. It's time to put an end for it once and for all.
Thank you, Mr. Compton. Do we have any questions? There don't seem to be any. Thank you very much for your presentation. Oh, sorry, we've got some lights appearing. Councillor Cooper.
Just one. Thanks for your submission, Gwyn. You're obviously across the numbers of this project over the last 3 years. Can you give a view of there is now a monopoly in terms of economic activity on the island, and that there is one sole operator? What impact do you think this will have on visitor numbers to the island?
Well, I mean, conventional economic theory would be that monopolies aren't particularly good for incentivising competition and differentiating of offerings for tourists. I don't know if that's strictly going to be the case in this sort of situation, but I think the sole operator now has been the recipient of a lot of money from the government in terms of investigating options. I think there was an option to build a lodge over on the island and a pier and whatnot. That was out of the PGF funding, but nothing's come of that. So, I'm very sceptical about what sort of development we would see in that space.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Coe.
Thank you, Gwyn. Based on what you've said, am I correct in assuming that you consider this to be a high-risk project for our community? And I just wonder what else, if we don't go ahead with this project, what would we do in its place or as an alternative for the use of those funds?
Well, as I said, you've got the budget that's blown out by 72%, and all we've done so far is do some stream works and work for a resource consent process. And there's the last council had some discussion about how other infrastructure projects had their budget blown out, and one of the comparisons was with Transmission Gully, and they're claiming that had blown out by something like 60%. But you're trying to compare one of the most complex pieces of geotechnical engineering in the country's history versus a 200-metre plus building down on the waterfront. It's that sort of blowout, 72%, I think's shows the risks behind this, and that it was never scoped properly, and the business case has never been properly assessed or properly reviewed even in the things. I think if you look at big projects like the Waikanae Library or the Paraparaumu Community Centre here, potentially you're going to have cost overruns there that need to be budgeted for. So that's something that I think this money could be better applied for, that the community and the things the community actually wants.
Thank you. So I'd ask elected members to please keep their questions relevant to the content of the submission that's just been presented. So thank you very much for your continued and erudite contribution to our council business. I nearly said Councillor Compton, but it's now Gwen. Okay, we have Richard Young next. Thank you.
Your Worship, councillors, mana whenua and all. Today, Council has the opportunity not only to cancel Gateway, but also to say sorry to the community for not listening, sorry to iwi for over-promising, sorry to ratepayers for failing to apply the most basic due diligence. The 2020 business case was the prime document that was used to justify the start of the Gateway project. I'm not going to repeat anything on budgets, but I will point out some points in here that just are basically nonsense. The concept that the visitor centre, the Gateway, would be the alternative that visitors would go to if they couldn't get to Kapiti Island is flawed, because that's not how the business model operates. The key mention in here that all the costs were based on the most rudimentary of design information, and this was rushed through. It should have red flagged the incident back in 2020 when the costs were not firmed up. We've already covered biosecurity, no evidence. Speaking with the operator, they see no requirement for any additional biosecurity. Provincial Growth Fund money, 50%, obviously it's well below that now, something like 25, 30%, is never an excuse to progress a bad project. Visitor numbers, expanding a wee bit on what previous speakers said, maximum visitor numbers, 58,000. That is almost 4 times the number that is achievable through DOC's figures, based on a 6-month season with about an 80% sailing rate. So what that would mean is 150 people would have sailed to Kapiti Island yesterday. Would you have been one of them? I wouldn't. So that means on other days up to almost 500 people going to the island in a day. The numbers are best fanciful and at worst made up. This business case should never have been approved in 2020 by Council. It should never have been the basis of progressing with Gateway. So where are we? The commercial case in the business case also followed up by other probably more expensive documents that followed it on from there. Interesting is by the time we get to the PwC one, the biosecurity function is minimal. And in fact, most of the economics are based on retail, office, and other information coming through from that. The facility was to be funded, as Council was to source funding from elsewhere. I don't believe any of that has happened so far. And also Council would end up running it and then charging people to use it. It does not have any community support. So in 2020, the Council made a decision based on a document that was, to be honest, economic nonsense. And since then, Council appears to have been trying to dig themselves out of a hole. So I believe that now is the time for Council to show true leadership, serve their community, take responsibility, and cancel Gateway. Please do not fail us again. Thank you.
Do you have any questions for Mr. Young? There don't appear to be any. Thank you very much. Next I have Dale Evans.
To our new mayor and the councillors, I've often been a critic of this council, and I will continue to keep a close eye on what you do. However, today I'm here to congratulate you
It seems at last you have listened to the people of Kapiti and will be finally putting a stop to the Gateway project, which the public have never supported. Never supported. The debt is already way too high, and the Gateway would have added millions more to that debt. It is clearly unaffordable and would have been a major impact on the ratepayer, who are already struggling. Apart from the Mayor, every single councillor at this table spoke out against the Gateway during the elections, which I went to. The ratepayer reacted accordingly. I wish you well for the next 3 years. This is our chance to make a positive move, an honest start towards being an open and transparent council. I went to most of those election meetings, and in my view, this new council needs to listen to the ratepayer. We already have people moving out of the area because they can't afford the rates. The cost of living's going up. It's the wrong time to do all this. So I'll leave you with that. But you can rest assured I'll be hanging around and maybe doing odd stunts or whatever to get that point across. Most of the stunts I've done and most of the things I've done here to try and make those who are elected realise what they're doing. So it's all up to the councils that were elected and to the Mayor to start thinking about the ratepayer. Thank you. Now, is there any questions?
That's my line.
Well,
are there any? There don't appear to be any. Thank you for your input
around.
once again, Dale. Much appreciated. And I now have Neil Mackay via Zoom. Is he ready? Kia ora, Neil. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me all right? Sorry.
Yep. We can hear you very well, thank you.
There we go.
Yeah, that's better. We can see your whole face now.
Yeah, thank you. It's not necessarily a good thing, but never mind. Tēnā koutou katoa, Neil Mackay, the chair of the Kapi Economic Development Kotahitanga Board. I really want to focus on process to some extent. I want to focus on the continuation of the robust process Council has in place for decision making, and I guess ensuring that the high standard continues with the new Council in this triennium. Council will be required to make many decisions over this time, and it's important that those decisions are properly informed. And informing the decision making process on projects generally requires a report that includes a paper that outlines a business case, consultation that has been carried out to date and is planned, and any important questions that need to be answered, expected cultural and economic and ecological benefits, and any other due diligence that is deemed necessary. So councils will have all the same information to work from. They can review it, interrogate it, and ask further questions to get a clear and better understanding of the case before them. And this process also allows the community groups in their various forms and individuals to contribute their views to a forum that is designed to encourage discussion and debate. And a lot of these views have not necessarily been heard in the wider community for a number of reasons. There are those that are active in the community offering their views that generally attract the headlines, whilst there's a large number of others who are more passive and don't operate that way, relying instead on the integrity of a council decision-making process to provide a fair hearing. In regard to the Te Uruhi project, I urge you to follow good process to ensure that the decision you finally make has been based on a good understanding of the information you've received. And that's all I can ask. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Mr Mackay? Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Neil, for your submission. So you're saying in the previous 2 years in the journey of this project that those things have not occurred previously? The information is not available? The community hasn't...
No, what I'm saying is that the information is changing and has changed since a lot of views have been formed in and around this project, and it's important to keep up to speed and understand where that lands so that you can all understand whether or not that's sufficient for you then to make a decision on whether you go ahead or not in this particular project.
Thank you.
Councillor Halliday.
Through you, Madam Chair. Neil, thank you for your presentation. I just had one question. You talk about process, and I'm just curious. There was a local advisory group right back at the beginning of this process. It was meant to actually be the next step after the TRC report was landed. But at the time, that was negated, and a gateway governance group was put in place. Now, you talk about local input into this process. My comment would be that if this advisory group had been utilised...
Keep it to questions, please, Councillor Halliday, rather than comments.
That we would be in a different state, in a different position now. Would you agree with that comment?
Yes, I think there's a lot of learnings, really, Councillor, that should be brought into the next decision-making process, and certainly that needs to be something that's considered.
And I also note that you made a comment in an email that was sent to us regards to full support by local mana whenua. Yet I know from our local community board in the last year that we recognise Carl Weber as Hau Kainai or Kaitiaki down at Paraparaumu Beach. Yet I know that he's been fully against this project right from the beginning, yet he hasn't been informed or been utilised as part of the process. Would you think that's a fair comment?
I'm not in a position really to answer that.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions? I think you need to push.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. Sorry. Thanks, Neil, for presenting today. We've had a couple of presenters from the public gallery this morning talk about the business case and suggesting that's quite heavily flawed. As the economic development leaders, I guess, in our district, does the Kotahitanga Board view that business case as sound?
Certainly, the business case that was provided by PwC was reviewed by us. The economic impacts that it showed, and the information that was made available to us, we supported, and we supported that at that time. What we have to do is understand what's happened since. There has been cost changes. There has been cost changes in just about every project around New Zealand by considerable amount, and obviously those things now need to be reconsidered. And that's really where I'm coming from today. Let's get some information that's now current, and let's put our minds to and put a proper process around it to make an informed decision, and that's really where I'm coming from.
Thank you. Just one lot of questions. Sorry, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Coe.
Yes, thank you, Neil. Given that there seems to be continual changes in this project, maybe we need to be continually updating it. Where do we draw the line? Would you, given the continuing changes, describe this as a high-risk project, and especially given the number of assumptions that need to be made in terms of the forecasting required for the business case?
No, I wouldn't regard it as high risk. I would regard it as there is a need, as you say, to draw a line in the sand and say, there's enough information for us to make a decision. But I think everyone around the table, should have that information in front of them and make that decision.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to the next public speaker now. Thank you, Mr. Mackay. George Hickton.
Thank you. I'm here on behalf of the Tourism Advisory Board. We report into the Economic Development Unit, and I'm the chair of that board. And I'm here to urge you not to make a decision to can this project at this point. We see this as a particularly crucial project for a number of reasons. These will all emerge, particularly when we look at cultural, educational, community, but more importantly, when we look at the potential for the tourism development within this region. One of the issues that we've been looking at over the last 12 months is just how well Kapiti is doing in the tourism environment. And when we look at our performance, we recognise there's a lot of opportunity to actually improve it. By our reckoning, we're around about 50% behind where we should be in terms of visitor spend in this region. We look across the hill into the Wairarapa, they are significantly ahead of us in the visitor market. The visitor spend is considerably greater than this region, and that shouldn't be the case. We believe that we need to, from a tourism point of view, there are a number of things that need to be done in order to ensure that we actually do create this economic opportunity. By our reckoning, it's probably the single most important economic opportunity this region's got and the easiest to realise. The Destination Management Plan is something that's been put together, and we are working on that to implement it on behalf of the region. We're bringing the tourism industry together to create a better dynamic that actually captures that. But as part of that, one of the key issues is going to be how do we actually connect up the visitor market and how do we actually inform visitors of what there is to see and do in this region. One of the issues that comes through constantly is this sort of feeling that for some reason the gateway is a gateway to Kapiti Island. It isn't a gateway to Kapiti Island. It's a gateway to Kapiti Coast. And it's there to provide understanding about our region, its culture, and the opportunities that exist here. We believe that by not pursuing this project and by not fully evaluating it, we run the severe risk of not being able to capture what is a significant economic opportunity for Kapiti. That amount, by the way, is around about $50 million a year, which we would estimate we're leaving behind every year. So we need to do something to actually capture that. From the Tourism Advisory Board perspective, we believe we have a plan to do that, but you need something like Te Uruhi to be a catalyst. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Hickton. Are there any questions?
Yes.
Councillor Coe.
Thank you, Mr. Hickton. Do you agree that there are other ways to promote Kapiti other than having a building on the beachfront that costs $8 million? And secondly, could you please explain the nature of your relationship with John Barrett and Kapiti Island Nature Tours, and whether you consider that based on that relationship you're an independent commentator on this issue?
Yeah, I could explain that. I've been an independent advisor to Kapiti Island for well over 10 years. I'm now a director of that company, and as I say, we do not see it as something being built for Kapiti Island. We see it as something being built for the Kapiti Coast. I'm here on behalf of the Tourism Advisory Board, and who are solidly behind this request that we do not cancel this project at the moment.
Just wait for your microphone, please, Councillor Coe.
Sorry, there was another part to my question, which was, are there alternatives to promote Kapiti as a destination other than a building, $8 million building on the beachfront? Thank you.
You can, obviously there are marketing alternatives that one could use, but you also need a focal point, which we don't have in this region at the moment, where the visitor market can identify and actually come together in terms of finding out information about what there is to see and do here. Much of our tourism infrastructure here is underutilised, and that's because it just simply doesn't get the promotion or the focus or the profile.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks, George. My question is, by the way, people could say that Otaki is the gateway to Kapiti coming south, and Whakakariki is the gateway coming north, but and Waikanai obviously is the cultural centre of the. Just in regards to, it's a
You
bit of a
forgot round
follow-up
Maddie.
question to the alternatives to this. So, assuming this single building at Paraparaumu Beach doesn't go ahead, it's what are the other options? And from a tourism point of view, do you think that there would be a value in telling our story right along the coast?
Absolutely, and that's what this is designed to do. We do need to tell our story, and we've got an incredible story in this region when we start looking at our cultural history and also what we have to offer. We don't tell that story at all, and this provides the opportunity to connect up all of those unique settlements that are part of the Kapiti Coast, and also tell and explain to people just what there is to see and do here and how they might like to spend additional time with us. It's crucial, and it is one of the ways in which you fully realise the economic potential of tourism. And I say again, we're $50 million a year behind what's been spent in the Wairarapa by Wellingtonians. They've got to get over the Rumataka Hill to get there. We have far more things on offer that simply aren't used and aren't utilised. When we look at our facilities now, we've got a new Namanu, the new Mahara Gallery, all of this thing coming on stream, but we actually need a place to profile this, and we don't have that.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, George, for your submission. I have a couple of questions. The first one is your submission is that it's not a gateway to Kapiti Island, but a gateway to the Kapiti Coast. I would challenge that. However, if that is the case, I see in line 4 of the indicative business case under the revenue stream for this building and 313,290 fees and charges. So this building in the business case is lumping that onto the sole operator going to Kapiti Island, 300,000 in fees and charges, most of which, from my knowledge, is around a charge on the biosecurity. Firstly, do you, with your knowledge of Kapiti Island tourism, and do you think it's fair for the council to lump $300,000 raising to $377,000 by 2027 on a sole operator? And what effects would that have on that operator?
That's a fee per visitor to support biosecurity, and so that will simply be charged to the visitor.
I'm aware that Mr. Hickton is here speaking in his role as Tourism Advisory Board, so it's up to you whether you choose to answer that question. It's not not actually relevant to the presentation.
That's fine.
Could I just respond to your first point about the Kapiti Island and not being a gateway to the island? The island is the attractor, it is the icon for our region. What we want to do is use that icon to profile the rest of the region. That's why it's where it is. It's critically important that it's that location because that's where people focus when they come to this region. But we want to turn it back onto this region, the wider region, so that we actually enhance what it is they see and do here.
Thank you. My next question is, in terms of a monopoly in the tourism space, would you expect to see visitation go up or go down in a monopoly situation where we've gone from 2 competitive businesses discounting, advertising and being active in the market to a sole operator? Would you view a monopoly in terms of visitation to the island to decrease or increase?
I guess that goes back to I'm not here to represent, to talk about the Kapiti Island thing. I will respond to that and say that we do expect visitation to go up. That's the plan. Absolutely.
Thank you. And last question. No, I'll leave it there. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Who's next? Looking for a red light. Councillor Halliday.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Hickton. I have 2 questions. The first one, you talked with regards to tourism development. I note the eyesight was closed due to cost or OPEX, and looking towards a digital future was given as another reason instead of looking at bricks and mortar. you talk, we've had a substantial spend to date on this Gateway project with little or not much to show for it in regards to
I would
tourism
encourage
space.
elected members not to preface their questions with statements around the item that's going to be debated in the agenda, please. Thank you.
I was going to ask whether, sorry, that's thrown me out. Do you think if that money had been spent on creating a digital presence, that we would perhaps be in a better space than we are now with regards to getting some of that $15 million spend that you were talking to?
The money, as I understand it, was spent on the evaluation and preparing the project on the basis that it would go ahead. So I can't really suggest what else it should have been spent on. That was what the focus was.
All right. My next question is, you made a comment there that the building is where it is because of that importance of it being the central point. But the TRC report limited this project to a certain geographical area. My question is, do you think if there had been a wider approach to that report, or a wider approach to a gateway for Kapiti rather than a gateway for Kapiti Island, that would be the ideal spot?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Okay. Thank you. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor Halliday. And I have just noticed that happening in general with the questions. It wasn't anything particularly about that particular question. Mr. Butler?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Mayor. With your Tourism Board hat on, and given the fact that the cost of this project has escalated massively, are there any non-essential items that you think could be taken out of the project, out of that building, to actually bring its cost down but still return a good investment to the Kapiti region?
I do think it needs re-evaluation, and cost savings could well be made. That's why we're arguing for it to continue through the process. I think there's an opportunity here to make it a much more acceptable project to everyone. What I'm trying to avoid is that it's shut down now. We never have the opportunity of realising what this could be. So yes, there are different operational models that could operate there. There are different people that might be able to be functioned. Whether or not you should have a CAF there or not, I think the issue from the tourism point of view is you should not. You should allow the businesses in the area to actually benefit from it. All of those things need to be considered. My concern is that we don't get the chance to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, thank you, George, for coming along today to speak from the point of view of the Tourism Advisory Board. So you mentioned that this area has is lagging behind. Excuse my voice. I just need to have a glass of water, but I'll wait till afterwards. Is lagging behind. So I suppose my question is, what is Thank you. So, have you done the numbers to actually estimate the financial benefits of having that one building in that one location for this district in relation to tourism? And this is actually profit, probably.
Yeah, well, I think those are the sorts of things that you need to evaluate. It's going to be very hard to nail it specifically down to that building, but what that building does, as I've said, is provide a catalyst for visitor information. It provides a catalyst for becomes a focus in its own right. But also it has enormous other benefits in terms of mana whenua. Educational benefits are significant. All of the education providers in this region are for it because they see the benefit in educating our young rangatahi about what there is to see and do and some of the history of the place. So there are all sorts of benefits that come out of this. On a straight tourism benefit, we see it as being an important catalyst and ensuring that people that come to this region actually understand how much there is to see and do and to stay longer and ultimately spend more. When I talk about a potentially $50 million a year that's being left behind because of us not being able to attract enough people here, remembering 75% of that actually goes to services business to tourism. They're not going to tourism operators, that's going to the rest of the community. And that's being lost. Right now, I see growth aspirations coming out of the Wairarapa of 6% a year. They've actually set that as a target. We don't even have that target yet. So we've got a long way to go. And it's why I am absolutely urging you not to cancel this project at the point where we're starting to understand the tourism potential of this region in a way in which it's never been understood before, it's never been promoted before, and we've never set ourselves targets like we intend to do now.
So if I may ask a second question, thank you, and I agree with some of the aspirations in terms of increasing our tourism dollar, but given the relatively small footprint of this proposed building and the high cost per square metre, do you think that there is opportunities to be able to spread, I suppose, our tourism knowledge points and information around the district so that each of the other areas in this community can also benefit from visitor attractions based on what could be provided there?
Yeah, totally. And part of that is that we need to get the tourism industry itself well connected so that they start promoting and supporting one another. And what we've discovered over the last 12 months since we've been operating is that there are many, many operators in this region at the moment that are not aware of what's happening elsewhere. There isn't a connected tourism industry here at the moment, and we're trying to bring that together. That will happen, and that's what enables people to explore the region from Otaki down to Paikakariki.
Thank you.
I believe you've already asked a question to the speaker, Councillor Wilson. Thank you very much, Mr. Hickton. That was a lengthy period of questions, but I think well worthwhile, and I'll afford the same to all the other speakers today. So thank you very much.
Thank you for listening.
So I'll continue with the public speakers around this particular item today, and Mr. Ogden, I'll leave you as a segue into the next. Sorry, I'll leave you as a segue because you're speaking on two topics. Or would you like to come now? Would you like to come now and speak to one and then... So I'll call Fred Davey, please. Okay. Mr. Ogden, if you could just talk about your submission on this topic, and then I'll ask you back once we've finished this topic for the next one, if that's okay.
Could I suggest that we combine them? It will save time.
Okay. Okay, we'll do that now then. Okay.
Your Worship, congratulations also to fellow councillors I see and the people that were elected, a great team to run this council. And I've even got your comedians here on it, which is keeps you keeps you on the sane side of things. And also, I wondered who that was on Zoom. Is Councillor Kofat? Are you really in San Francisco? Yes. No, are you or not? Well, if you ever go there, get a chance to cycle over the bridge. It's a great experience. So Roger Booth, the current president of Grey Power, asked me to attend these meetings. Means I can now not stay for all the meeting, but I can go to my office and do some work and do other things. Kia ora. Good morning. I'm on the committee of Grey Power. I was quite surprised to see that Gateway had some impetus still going through the election process. And I think my view about it, I think it has some intrinsic merit. But what I think should happen is that it should be parked and left there and not a dollar spent until those who are enthusiasts can form a body and raise the rest of the money. There are some intrinsic idiosyncrasies in this area, like the airport. And I think and hope that things like the Gateway might be something that you chance upon and think it's a good idea. If you go to Adelaide, you can catch a tram down to the beach to a place called Glenelg, which is spelt both forwards and backwards, Glenelg. And I think you could put trams down to the beaches, now that we've found that Otaki is a meritorious place to go to. Thank you, sir. And that sort of thing. I think it'd be great to have a tourism committee and it should be built upon, and we should believe in what can happen rather than just say no. And there's been, I would agree, heaven only knows, it's probably been some money wasted, but there are a lot of naysayers. Let's just park it and see if we can find some support, Madam Chair. As for Grey Power, we are now on an advocacy
route. We want to talk about the older people and our place as one of the demographic major factors and functions in this particular district, which we love. So I could go on and on and on, but that's about it really. Thank you. Kia kaha.
Yeah, thank you very much, and it's congratulations to Roger Booth on becoming chair of Grey Power, and it's wonderful that you'll be coming to our meetings, and we look forward.
Well, I hope
we
it
look
is.
forward to your input. So if ever you want to say anything during the meeting, just wave out, and we'll certainly make sure we provide you with a microphone.
Place there, you know, everybody looking at it. I wish he wasn't there. I'd sit there, you know.
Yeah, and in the past we have had quite a strong representation from our older community in
Trevor.
chambers, and certainly it was so valuable as we
Yeah.
as we went through our planning processes and our decision making. So thank you very much, and we look forward to your presence here. Thank you.
No questions?
No
Good.
questions from anybody? No, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
So I now have Fred Davey.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to be able to address Council today. I would like to support Councillor Coe's proposal because I'm one of the people affected by it. I've been interested in the project for probably 6 years now. I was certainly in at the start of this last episode about 2 years ago, when I had a singular lack of success getting any information about the proposal from council staff. And this came right through until we had a council meeting where we could speak to council about the proposals. So the one thing I'd like to emphasise is the singular lack of consultation of local residents down by the beach. The Mayor, Your Worship, I would say, you may recall, I sent all councillors an email about a year ago saying you're in for gross cost overruns when you approved the budget at 5 mil or 2.5 from council. And what happens within the year? You've blown out to over 7. It's going to go a lot higher. And one of the reasons I say that is I'm an affected party under resource consent, and I've been sitting through the resource consent process, which is going through at the moment. It's getting towards the end. I can see a whole lot of additional expenses from consultants and such like coming in. Now, as a single, just a resident who doesn't count for much these places, I can see that the process for the resource consent is council applies to council for resource consent. It has this artifact of having a consultant to act for them. They draw in a lot of consultants to give expert advice, and expert advice they give is a load of evidence, and us as local residents affected have to go through this. I'll tell you that it's about 800 pages of so-called evidence from so-called expert witnesses, and I would, to use a vernacular, drive a bus through some of it. It's not very good. The thing about the process which has been going on, and I think it's useful for council officers to know this, is it is largely driven by council officers. Resource consent for the Gateway project, we had a bit split off to start off with, which was for the stream, the upgrade of the stream area. That went through without consultation externally. If people had seen what happened, there was a major mistake in the engineering, which should have been foreseen, and this gave a cost overrun of about 200,000. The rest of the process we're going through at the moment, and I would have to say I'm very disappointed with the quality of the information coming through. The result we won't hear for a little while, but I would say I'm very concerned about what's happening, how it's being handled. I think the whole project should be stopped at the moment because some of the issues discussed under resource consent are traffic, and traffic is going to increase phenomenally around that area if the forecast from people, say, for example, from our tourist friend here, goes ahead, then it's going to be really bad. this has not been looked into. It hasn't been dealt with adequately, and it surely should be. There are many other things I could touch on which has gone on in this process so far. We've had reference to the PricewaterhouseCoopers report, which justified the project financially. If you read that in detail, read the appendices at the end, if you see the number of disclaimers, etc., it was totally a council staff document based on council staff information.
Thank you, Mr. Davey. If you could wrap up now, please.
Yeah, I will wrap up now and say I will strongly recommend you stop this in its tracks. If you look for tourism, you should look at the distributed tourism and not concentrate the focus purely on one place, which is very, very busy in summer. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Davey, I actually have a question for you, if that's okay.
Yeah, hi.
I'm just wondering, you mentioned traffic. Was that considered as part of the resource management process?
Resource consent, it looked into traffic flow, and the effect on things like the roundabout, access to the beach for example, the boat people, fishing people. I was not impressed by the report, quite honestly. They say they are using numerical modelling. Now, if you know anything about numerical modelling, and I do, rubbish in, rubbish out.
So I'm just...
I say I'm not impressed at all by it.
Yeah.
And I have said so at the resource consent hearing. And the other thing which has been touched on already is who benefits. To me, a park should be a park.
There's certainly a lot of information presented at those hearings. Thank you very much for your time today. Mr. Laharavel. I don't see any lights. Thank you.
Kia ora, councillors, Mayor. I'll be very brief, you'll be glad to know. I basically am in favour of the Gateway, but not in its current form. I think it's a wasted opportunity. I think there's an opportunity for an iconic building. I think there's far too much emphasis on the biosecurity aspect, which I don't really see the point of, to be honest. I think if you consider certain iconic buildings in Australia, for example, Uluru, the Seven Apostles, they are iconic buildings and they attract a lot of people. So I think there's a great architectural loss there if it's not a well-designed building. Basically, we seem to have a shed that's decorated with various digital appliances, etc. The other aspect, I'm a project manager as well as an architect, retired architect, and done lots of various other things. And I think one of the things I've learned throughout my career is that briefing is fundamental. Better briefing means better building. So I think the importance is that you actually think very carefully about what you're trying to do. I think also the aspect of the way the competition is run. If it's a competition, I think there were certain failures in that, and it could have been better organised, maybe a two-stage competition. It certainly didn't seem to attract the sort of solutions one would have hoped for. Anyway, the end result is I think there should be some positive aspects come out of this project. I don't think it should be all negative. I don't think this project should be parked completely. I think it should be looked at in the future, maybe in a modified form. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Thank you. Darren Hunter.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Darren Hunter. I live at Paraparamu Beach. I can see McLean Park from my home, but I can't see the Te Uruhi site. I also have been quite outspoken about the process that council has used in this whole Gateway debacle. I've also helped Zena Knight with her submission, and also spoke on her behalf at the resource consent hearings. This has been going on 2 years, so I believe I've got a bit of a very good understanding of where we sit at the moment. Now, I believe all of the people in this room who are now councillors heard loud and clear at the speaking at the public gatherings for the elections, that they heard loud and clear that the community don't want this project. There was numerous reasons why people don't want this project. It's not a one topic or dislike. There's a number of reasons. So I'd like to give you a couple of those reasons just to reflect on the sort of issues that you're facing with this building, and I believe you should support the motion to abandon this building because it's totally inappropriate and the community don't want it. So one of the biggest things for me, and talking through with Zena, is ponding. The entire site of Te Uruhi, the car parking, the approach to Te Uruhi is all in ponding land on the district plan. So Zena's property is across the road from the proposed site. The road repeatedly floods. Now, the council's response to that was, oh, there was a block sump. Well, Zena's lived there 42 years. In recent years, that ponding has increased. So the science behind the ponding is a real concern, given that you're putting a building in a ponding zone. The tidal surge up the stream has not been identified and talked about in the resource consent, but the recent works actually has exacerbated the problem, and they've been down to the council have been down there in the last 6 months about 4 times cleaning out logs from the surge of the high tide. The other big one is the massive cost. The massive cost to build the building and the massive cost to run the building. Now, recent numbers bandied around for the Mahara Gallery was $400,000 a year to keep that to open and run that facility how they want to. Now, I can see a comparison between the Mahara Gallery and Te Uruhi, and they're talking $400,000 a year to keep the doors open. Now, in real terms, that's $7,600 every week that ratepayers have to fork out to keep the doors open for a building of that nature. The other thing that is quite laughable reading through the resource consent and the council submissions is they say the building's relocatable. Well, it purely is not. It's going to have to be chopped into many pieces to be relocatable, and they haven't even considered the cost of relocating that building in the event of a climate emergency, which has been designated now by this council. There's a climate emergency in place in their policy. 18 car parks have been removed, owned by council, owned by ratepayers. 18 car parks are removed. The process was flawed from start to finish. The Jenkins report said it was flawed, and council have thrown everything but the kitchen sink at this development. They have 7 to 11 comm staff, 4-page ads. Consultants we've spent over $500,000 on consultants just to try and justify the location of this building. The resource consent after 2 years is still not approved, and I believe if it is approved, it's likely it will go to the High Court. Expect to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in defending your position. The community was told in 2020 that it was shovel ready.
Mr. Hunter?
2 years is still not shovel ready. I would like you to support the motion, and I would like to see the gateway abandoned, start again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just before I open to other questions, I've got one. It's around one detail of your submission where you said that the Mahara Gallery is projected to be a $400,000 operational cost. Have you done a comparison between the two buildings and the staffing and the HVAC and all the elements that it would take to operate the building?
Yes, I have. The money that was approved, $400,000, was 6 staff at Mahara Gallery to increase the extra service they were going to provide. The gateway would need 3 or 4 staff to operate it. However, the operational cost will be higher at Te Uruhi because of the location, security, maintenance, the lighting levels that we're going to be at Te Uruhi. It's going to be a very comparable cost.
So why would you think that Te Uruhi would need more security than the Mahara Gallery, which has a multi-million dollar
Because it's beachfront and living at Paraparamu Beach, there's constant vandalism. Council assets like seats are constantly smashed, litter. The building will be an attraction for people to loiter, and the windows will be constantly needing to be cleaned. So there's just constant maintenance, constant security.
Okay, so it's obvious you put some thought into that. So are there any other questions? Councillor Hanford.
Yeah, kia ora, Darren. Thank you for coming in and sharing your thoughts with us, and definitely hearing the concern, particularly around cost, that you emphasise not only now but have in the past. So if we were to strive to achieve similar outcomes around potentially biosecurity, mana whenua stories being told, and anchor for our kapiti story, is there a kind of an acceptable amount that you think council should be allocating towards those sorts of activities holistically, if we were to kind of budget for actualising those aspirations?
Well, that's a discussion for council, but I believe spending that amount of money on a 200 square metre building is a one-trick pony. The money perhaps should be spread over a number of tourism activities if you're going to invest in tourism at all. And biosecurity is a big part of that building that's not used very little.
So am I hearing then that you agree with the aspirations that Te Uruhi is seeking to achieve, but just not in the form that it's currently in at the cost that it's currently touted to be?
Well, I'm not sure what the aspirations are. At the design stage, there was 9 points that the council tried to achieve as their milestones for achieving something with Te Uruhi. As the 2 years have gone by, that 9 has been sort of morphed into something else, so I'm not actually sure what they're trying to achieve.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to go to Councillor Coфord on Zoom and then Councillor Warwick.
Oh, thanks for that, Darren, and good morning, everybody. Looks like I've got the technology sorted out. Darren, sorry, Sophie sort of asked my question, but look, just what's your feelings about a focal point or a gateway facility at Paparamu Beach? Are you behind that, or?
Well, I think with the recent plan change suggestion being floated through council and up for submissions, is the weight of building in a reserve, a natural open space, and the intensification they're hoping to achieve through their plan change. I think the position is totally unacceptable. I think it should be back from the water's edge. We've been told time again there's a managed retreat type mantra within government. They're talking about this thing called intolerable risk, and the Gateway site and the whole of McLean Park falls within that description under the government's new policies. There's new policy work around flood work and mitigation and retreat that the government are working on. Are we putting a building right in the storm of that policy on that body of work that we don't know the answers to yet? So my question is, yes, possibly something at Paraparamu Beach, but definitely not on the beach side of the road.
Thanks, Darren. You've answered my question. Thanks.
My question is, you're saying to scrap the project and restart, there's going to be cost attached to restarting another project. Have you got any idea what that might be, or considered that?
They've spent over $1 million on the stream, so we get the benefit of that stream work, so that's not money lost. They've spent a considerable amount of money on consultants. They've done work on geotech, so that information can be reused. So whilst they've spent some money and considerable money on consultants and traffic reports, some of that work can be resurrected for perhaps something down at the beach. But yes, there is some money being lost, but it pales in comparison to the amount of money you're going to spend to invest to build it and also to run it.
So, but would it be better not to just reimagine the project?
Well, you can't reimagine the project when you've got a resource consent that's very specific about what you can and can't build there. It means, that's why I'm saying abandon it, start again, because you can't muddy the waters by saying you're going to resurrect it and change it and tweak it, because you've got commercial activity in there, you've got tourism activity, you've got site coverage, you've got height recession planes that you're breaking. There's 11 non-complying activities. How do you address those? By resurrecting it into something else.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Any more questions, Councillor Warwick? Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for coming along today to speak. So, going forward, there's obviously some uncertainties in terms of further cost escalations. Given your background in this area, are you able to provide any sorts of general figures around further cost escalations to, I suppose, in the building industry, not necessarily this building, unless you feel so inclined?
Well, the recent number of 7.75 million, there was a large chunk of that was for the car park in McLean's, further in McLean Park. Obviously, council staff will remove that from the budget to make numbers look great. But the actual build per square metre on Te Uruhi is insane. I build houses for a living, design houses for a living, and $3,000 to $10,000 a square metre might be at the very, very top end of an executive home. You're talking a numbers well in excess of that.
So, I've got a follow-up to that. So do you think there would potentially be a possibility to reduce the cost of this build?
Absolutely not. No.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time today, Mr. Hunter. Much appreciated.
Any question?
Oh, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Darren. Thanks for that. we've heard, given you're a resident down at the beach and have had an opportunity to observe what it's like down there every summer for not as many summers as me, but a few, right? And what we've heard is that the time that this building would be most likely to attract tourists is the time when the beach is already really busy. So is that's what I've heard. So is that your experience?
Yeah, so I walk on the beach daily with my dogs. Obviously, on terrible days like yesterday, there's nobody there. Absolutely nobody. On the days are magnificent, it's bursting at the seams. The rubbish bins are full. There's a constant request to get the bins emptied. So the beach, McLean Park is very, very popular. So it's those sunny days brings the people out. When the weather's not so great, the people stay away in droves.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Sandra Daly. So that brings us to the end of the speakers about Te Uruhi today, to the notice of motion, and we're now hearing about the governance structure. And Sandra Daly is representing the Kapiti Health Advisory Group. Welcome today, Sandra. Much appreciate your presence.
Thank you, and I'm sorry to divert you from such an interesting topic, but kia ora katoa. I'm currently chair of the Kapiti Health Advisory Group, and we're here today to request that we be designated an advisory group to Kapiti Coast District Council under the umbrella of the proposed Social Sustainability Subcommittee to support and actively contribute to the health-related work of this body. As you all know, our health environment is changing dramatically and rapidly. Under the Te Pai Ora Healthy Futures Act, up to 80 localities will be established to expand the role of communities in determining health service priorities and to develop and monitor locality health plans. 12 areas throughout New Zealand are currently being piloted as localities, including Horowhenua North and Porirua, and it's likely that Kapiti, with or without Otaki included, will be added to these. The development of localities and the 3-year locality health plans will be led by iwi and approved by iwi Māori partnership boards. However, the new legislation provides a role for local authorities in the establishment and management of both localities and health plans. We strongly encourage the Council to take up the opportunity to provide input and guidance into what is wanted and needed by our community, and we believe that the Kapiti Health Advisory Group can make a sound contribution to this work. And I've just circulated a little paper that will tell you a bit about what we've achieved. While the provision of health services is not a responsibility for local government, as the body democratically elected to act for our district, KCDC has an opportunity to speak out strongly and advocate clearly for better health services for our residents, especially in the establishment, management and assessment of the locality and the health plan. KHAG is well positioned to provide, that's our advisory group, provide support, information and channels for KCDC to participate in this opportunity. Not only do we anticipate significant health benefits from the work improving health services for our area, but it will enhance our lifestyle and have flow-on economic effects, encouraging new businesses and attracting new residents to the area. We'd welcome the opportunity to work with Council on the provision of improved health services for Kapiti. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your submission. Do I have any questions from elected members? There don't appear to be any. Councillor Halliday.
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you very much, Sandra, for coming in today. Look, I just wanted to check, just so it's clear in my head, look, with regards to the localities, and obviously you have 2 new health entities as well, I know that there is the Kapiti Health Network, which is chaired by Atiawaki Whakalongotai, and would it be fair to say that this group is more geared towards delivery and overseeing sort of what we perhaps require in our area, and would you perhaps see the Kapiti Health Advisory Group being more in that advocacy, advisory sort of role that would sort of work in partnership with that?
Yes, definitely. The health network is a very good, capable body, and it's been set up, but it's primarily a group of providers. It was set up to bring together the local providers so that they could network together. So that's a different role to an advisory group, which would be advocating and working. How the future will evolve for the network, we're not quite sure at this stage, but at present it is a group of providers.
And with regards to, say, Capital Health Advisory Group, should we say, morphing into a panel or committee, I would be thinking that there would be room for representatives also from other, say for Otaki or from other key, or from Māori or from other key areas to be involved in that group as well. You're not talking about specifically it just being that limited group that you currently have?
No, definitely not. We see ourselves partnering and working closely with a whole lot of groups around. We currently have close relationships with groups, with groups like Wellington Free Ambulance, the group that came out of the DHB, with Te Ora Campus Health, which is our PHO here. We're working to develop relationships with local iwi groups like Manaaki Kapiti we've been meeting with. We're really keen to work with all the NGOs and health-related groups in Kapiti to bring a voice to the table.
Lovely. I'm just curious also about the capability of the group as well. I know it's Kapiti residents, made of Kapiti residents, and I've had the good fortune of being a council appointee to this group over the past 3 years. Would it be a fair comment to say that the calibre of this group and the connections with this group would be of good benefit or substantial benefit to our community as such?
Absolutely, we're a really well-connected group. we have links into a whole lot of different areas, and the people on the board, which have included people like yourself and Councillor Kathy Spires, chaired it for many years, is extremely high, and I'm really privileged to be their chair at present.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Hanford.
Yeah, kia ora. I just had a similar question around whether it would be the current Kapiti Health Advisory Group almost just being placed into the governance structure and at that level, as you talk about kind of advising the Social Sustainability Subcommittee, or more so, say, a health panel being created and then representatives from a whole bunch of different groups in the health space then having a seat at that table. So I just wonder whether you see it to be more kind of a predominantly advisory role, and that being taken up by currently the group that you are the chair of and do a great job of that role, I must say, or a broader health committee with kind of different representation.
We're working through that at present, actually. We were set up originally as a wide group and we had a lot of representation. It became just too big. And so we cut it down to an executive group of 12 with the intention of meeting 3 or 4 times a year with the wider groups. Unfortunately, COVID came along at that point and we weren't able to do that. But our plan is to get back and to refresh all of those relationships, bring those groups back in and be that wider, have that wider voice.
Cool. Look forward to the conversations to come.
Yes, likewise. I also look forward to the conversations to come as we review the roles of our advisory groups and panels, but certainly look forward to working with you in the meantime as we go through that process and supporting your work going forward. So thank you very much. Lynn Sleeth, Bruce Henderson, Richard Young. Would you like to speak now? Would you like to speak now or later on? I'm happy for you to speak now. I can't, sorry, it's far away, I can't hear. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. So that, in that case, that brings us to the end of public speaking time for now. What I'm going to do is we'll just get through the rest of this section of the paper and then we'll just stop before we get to reports because we need to have a little bit of a reshuffle of the chambers. So we have members' business. If you'll just bear with me a little bit today, I'm trying to save trees and it's quite a big agenda to navigate. So public speaking time responses. Do we have any responses from staff to any of the public speakers today? Mr. Edwards, Chief Executive.
It's working, isn't it?
Thank you, Darren.
Thank you, Worship.
Really just want to acknowledge the support and advocacy that we've seen to date from the Kapiti Health Advisory Group, and true to the commitment and spirit that we're bringing in this new triennium is the fact that we will be looking at how we are able to support and work together to continue to support our active community groups. So I really appreciate the presentation this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any leaves of absence? As while we're on leaves of absence, I'll remind elected members that they don't have to announce their leaves of absence in a public forum if they don't want to. I actually have the delegation to be able to approve them if they have any concerns around safety over the summer period. So matters of an urgent nature, I haven't been advised of any. Thankfully, the notice of motion came in good time, so it wasn't a matter of an urgent nature. The Mayor's report, it says nil on the agenda, but I have actually tabled something here today. It's a more conversational report than people will be used to. I do have a list of activities, but they'll be available at the next meeting. So I'll just table that report. Do I need to move and second to table that? Yeah, can I have a mover? Councillor Hanford, seconded by Councillor Wilson. Any discussion or debate? All in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. I hope you enjoy reading it at your leisure. Many of you will have read some of it already in my Mayoral columns in the Kapiti News. So that brings us to item 10, reports. So before we move on to that, we'll just take a short break. We've been going for an hour and 20 minutes or so. We're just going to have a little bit of a reshuffle so we can fit our other iwi representative around the table. Thank you. We'll re-adjourn at 5 past.